JJ, welcome to Breakdown. September 21, 2022. We're going to talk SEC Big Ten football.
We will. 3 weeks on the books.
3 weeks down. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, JJ, we're going to talk a little bit about last week's game, and then we're going to talk about this week's game. Last week, a couple of games that were notable games. I hate to say it, Michigan State, Washington.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't pick Washington, but you know where my heart was there because you know who the quarterback of the Washington Huskies is?
Indiana.
Yeah.
The lefty.
Last year, I was the biggest proponent of Michael Penix Jr. I thought he was going to win the Heisman, and he just couldn't get into the rhythm. He came back too early off a torn ACL, and he didn't look like himself. But against Michigan State last Saturday, he looked like himself.
Yeah. Wasn't a good game for Michigan State. You and I both had Michigan State winning that game, right?
We both did, but the same issues that plagued them is what troubled them this time, wasn't it? It was the secondary and the offensive line.
Yeah. Okay, another quick game from last week in the Big Ten.
I will say, though, that might have been the best game I've seen from Peyton Thorne. What do you think?
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay.
Without a doubt. To me, without a doubt.
Okay.
Let's go Oklahoma, Nebraska.
Oklahoma got off to a slow start at first, but then they were rolling.
What do you see in Nebraska future?
They're just going to keep on firing coaches. After they fired their defensive coordinator after that game against Oklahoma. The week before, they obviously fired Scott Frost.
Fired their head coach, fired the defensive coordinator. Their defense, man, it looked really, really bad this whole year.
Yeah.
This whole year.
Their offense hasn't looked much better.
Purdue, Syracuse. Purdue gave the game away.
They did. It wasn't the first game that they've given away. The Penn State game at home and then the Syracuse game. They could be undefeated, but instead it's Dino Babers' squad that's undefeated in Syracuse 3-0.
The big game last week, Penn State, Auburn. Penn State dominated.
Yeah, and that was a Penn State home game.
Auburn.
It didn't start off as a Penn State home game, but if you see it in the crowd, you saw the crowd. Penn State infiltrated Auburn, Alabama for that one, and then you saw pictures of just like their contingency that was there in the bars. They flooded Alabama, and they planted their flag pretty stoutly. I think Brian Harsin isn't long for Auburn.
I agree with you there. And you know what? We said, when Penn State started the year not in the top 25, we both thought that maybe they could be there.
Penn State and Tennessee, yeah.
Yeah, I think Penn State is better than I had given them credit for. I always thought it came down to their quarterback, and last year to me he was a little bit more inconsistent. But he's been pretty decent this year.
Yeah,
very decent.
Yeah, he is. He was bad at first against Purdue, but ever since then, since that final drive they put together to win the game, ever since then, Penn State has been rolling, and they've been good. I thought that them losing Jahan Dotson was going to be an issue, the receiver going in the first 2 rounds of the draft. But, we'll see. They're undefeated right now. I expect them to take a loss this weekend against Central Michigan, obviously. Those fighting Chippewas. They'll get the job done. But Penn State, James Franklin has Penn State where it's supposed to be, and they're doing pretty well.
I agree. Let's go to the SEC for a quick moment.
Let's move over to the SEC.
Brian Kelly got his first conference win.
He did. It's funny because Mississippi State went up 16-3, 16 to.
I think it was 3.
Yeah, they went up 16-3, and then they decided to stop scoring.
And they lost 31-16.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
As much as I hate to see a Mike Leach team lose, I think I'll be able to sleep at night. What's your take?
You know what? I'm waiting for LSU to really get their stuff started. Mississippi State, I think, has a really good pass offense. Their strategy.
Story of Mike Leach's life.
Their scheme is pretty good, and LSU was able to hold them to 16 points. So it makes me wonder if LSU's defense is that good, or if Mississippi State's offense just not as good as it was last year.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think LSU's defense is pretty good. They have pretty good receivers too. I think Brian Kelly's a good coach, and I expect them to be have some standout defensive moments and standout defensive games, if not consistently good defenses.
Okay, 2 more games from last week, then we'll get into this coming week.
Okay.
Arkansas, Missouri State. Bobby Petrino came back to Fayetteville.
Yeah, and Bobby Petrino was ready.
He was definitely prepared.
He was
better prepared than Arkansas.
Absolutely. I mean, he knew what he was getting into. He knew he was going to see a whole bunch of neck braces in the stands, and he knew exactly what he was getting into. And he scouted Arkansas, and he scouted Barry Odom's defense, and he knew the holes to exploit. And
Missouri State was 17. It was 17-0.
They did go up 17-0. I think the quarterback threw for what, 350?
356, I believe it was.
Okay, yeah. I mean, they have a lot of transfers from the higher, division level. I think they have 50 transfers.
It's in the 50s.
Yeah,
which I couldn't believe that you can have that many transfers.
So they do have more talent than you would expect from a Missouri State team, and obviously a name like Bobby Petrino is gonna. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say they were rated in the top 25 in the FCS division. Okay, JJ. Before we did our last week game, let's talk about Texas A&M and Miami. Texas A&M changed quarterbacks.
Yeah, and it didn't really have much of an effect whatsoever. Their offense still looked like it did.
They won.
They did win.
They beat number 13 Miami.
They did beat number 13 Miami. Their defense is legit. That defense is legit. The offense, though.
Okay, JJ.
I think I was reading something. Jimbo Fisher hasn't had one receiver drafted in any round at Texas A&M since he's been there.
Wow. That's a surprise, but they have the talent.
Definitely not the first round, but I think it was not in any round.
They have the talent. They definitely have the talent. So yeah, let's get started to this coming week. Let's look at this coming week. You just talked about Texas A&M. It's a big game down in Jerry's World this weekend. 7 o'clock. Texas A&M.
Yeah, it's listed as a home game for Texas A&M, but we all know it's going to be in Arlington in AT&T Stadium.
Yes, sir.
Texas A&M is favored by 2.5 points.
It started at 3.5. It dropped to 2.5. I'm sorry. It started at 3. It dropped to 2.5. I know Arkansas is going to win, but what does Texas A&M need to do in order to win?
Study the Missouri State tape. I don't think that their quarterback and receivers necessarily will be able to exploit Arkansas the way that Missouri State did. Arkansas was down they were down 3 starters in the secondary.
Yeah, and they're down. They will be down 2 Saturday.
Yeah, Catalan is out for the year.
Yeah,
he's never coming back, but they should get one more guy in the secondary, so that should help on the back end. But even if they don't, I mean, honestly, no disrespect to Max Johnson, no disrespect to Haynes King. I don't think either one of them is going to throw for 350 on an SEC defense this entire year. I think Missouri State, I think they had a better offensive mind than Texas A&M does with Jimbo Fisher.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Arkansas's defensive backs, though, my 2 favorite teams, Arkansas, Michigan State, they're 2 weakest. Both of them are weak in the defensive backs. Yeah. Very, very weak. Where Arkansas isn't getting their credit in my mind is their offense. Their offense has been consistent this whole year, and I'm not backing down from KJ Jefferson winning the Heisman. He's just go out and does what he has to do. He's not super flashy, but he's timely and he gets the job done.
I might say the same thing about Rocket Sanders though. He's a dynamic playmaker himself. And
their key rusher from last year is coming back. Johnson, I can't think of his first name, but yeah. He's been out the first 3 games from a torn ACL from last year. Supposed to been ready the last 2 weeks. I think eventually he's got to play. He's a pound and ground kind of guy. So,
nice change of pace.
Yeah. Okay, the other big game in the SEC before we get to the Big Ten. And JJ, I want to get your. We're going to talk about it, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to get your point spreads on all of these. The other big game in the SEC. Tennessee at home against Florida. Tennessee is 11.5 point favorite. How do you see that game playing out?
I would expect Tennessee to win the game
at home,
and I would expect Florida to cover that spread. But 11.5 is a big number. I know Florida looked bad against Kentucky at home.
Anthony Richardson, first game of the season, he looked like he was a lock for the Heisman Trophy, but that was only one game. Subsequently, his performance has not been that good.
Well, yeah, Tennessee I don't think has a defense that's as good as Kentucky's, but I do think that they have
Offense.
I do think that they have a very explosive offense. But I do think that even their defense, though porous, I think they have the linebackers to step up and to limit Anthony Richardson's running ability, which I think limits Florida's offense.
Great.
But yeah, I just don't. I think Kentucky got lucky. There was that Anthony Richardson threw it right to that defender like hard as a rocket, and he just somehow caught it and took it back for a second. Like those are unsustainable plays. I don't think that Tennessee is 11.5 points better than Florida. So
okay, let's talk about the Big Ten.
Okay.
Indiana, undefeated. They're going to go to Cincinnati on Saturday. Cincinnati lost one game. They lost to Arkansas. Is that a big game for both teams?
It's a huge game for Indiana. I mean, they're trying to get bowl eligible.
They're 3-0.
Yeah, and a win against Cincinnati would go a long way in having them actually become bowl eligible because.
Okay, let's talk about the Western Conference in the Big Ten. The team that was initially picked to win that conference has to go to Ohio State, Wisconsin. Wisconsin going to Ohio State this year. Does Wisconsin have a shot?
At covering? I don't know about that one. No, they don't have an opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, if Ohio State wakes up on the right side of the bed, they're gonna beat Wisconsin by 40.
Okay. Michigan at home again against Maryland.
They play a real opponent.
First time this year.
Yeah, they do play a real opponent. They play a real opponent, and they play, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and one of the three best.
Debatable, but go ahead.
Well, less debatable if you believe in advanced stats, but and one of the three best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. The other two quarterbacks outside of Talia Tagovailoa, who we're talking about. The other good quarterbacks in the Big Ten are C.J. Stroud and J.J. McCarthy, guys who, went to the playoff last year and will almost certainly go to the playoff this year.
Okay, J.J., one last game that's a really, really big game. Minnesota going to East Lansing Spartan Stadium. Can the Spartans bounce back?
They can. I mean, and if they don't against Minnesota, I think it's a swing game in their season. I think when we did the season previews, I think Minnesota was one of the teams that I'd highlighted for Michigan State.
We did. It was.
They're in a similar vein. They're both just outside the top 25. Minnesota has the opportunity to win their division. Michigan State has a more competitive division. But Minnesota's only favored to win by less than a field goal. And, what they say about home underdogs in September.
Okay.
So
what do they say about home underdogs in September?
Bet on them.
Okay. Bet on the home underdog. So Michigan State's the home underdog? So you would take them. Okay, Jay, you mentioned bet on them. We're going to do our sweet and spicy dozen. I'm going to give you 6 games. That's 12 teams. That's the dozen. I want you to give me whether or not they cover. Let's go with the SEC first.
Okay.
Tennessee. And these spreads were taken a couple of days ago, and I know the point spread keep changing. But when I looked at this a couple of days ago, Tennessee was 11-point favorite at home against Florida. Does Tennessee cover?
Tennessee does not cover.
Tennessee does not cover. Okay. Arkansas. I'll say Texas A&M in Dallas, with Texas A&M being the home team, although it's in Dallas. They're a 2.5-point favorite over number 10 Arkansas. Does Texas A&M cover the 2.5?
Arkansas wins the game, so
That means they can't cover.
you tell me.
All right. Let's go to the Big Ten. I got four games from the Big Ten. Cincinnati at home, 16.5 points against Indiana. Undefeated Indiana. Can Cincinnati cover 16.5 against an undefeated Indiana team?
They can. I think that they win by 2 touchdowns, and they don't cover against Indiana.
All right. We've already talked about Minnesota coming into East Lansing playing the Spartans. You said that Minnesota does not cover the 2.5. Is that
I say
correct?
normally
Okay.
you take the home underdog.
Okay. So in
This is a situation where I'm taking Minnesota. I like Muhammad Ibrahim
the running back
to run all over Michigan State,
Well,
which opens up.
Michigan State weakness is not their running defense.
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Muhammad Ibrahim can run all over teams that have a good running defense. That's how good he is. But once he does that in the first quarter, I mean, that just is going to open the passing game wide open. I mean, for Michigan State. So I actually
So
that's my
you
upset.
got Minnesota covering the 2.5.
I do have them winning by 3.
Ohio State at home against Wisconsin, 18-point favorite. 2 weeks ago, I would have thought this would have been a good game. Now, does Ohio State cover the 18 points?
For me, I think it's a stay away. I think if they want to, they can. And if they are feeling generous, they might win by 17. For me, I would stay away from that. But if I had to pick, I mean, Wisconsin, you know what? Graham Mertz looked good. Allen looked good. Their offensive line, has some issues. I'm going to say Wisconsin does cover that spread. I think they sneak it in and they lose by 17.
Okay. Excuse me.
What say you about that game?
You know what? I'm going to stay away from it, just like you advised.
Yeah.
Okay, JJ, the last one. Your maize and blue team at home again. Have they left Ann Arbor this year?
I don't know.
They have not.
I mean, I can't imagine them having a home with Colorado State or UConn. So
Okay, so your maize and blue team is at home again against Maryland, what you say is the third best quarterback in the Big Ten. There are
I think he might be the second best. I think he's probably ahead of JJ McCarthy.
Okay, they're a 17-point favorite
Mhm.
over the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. Do they cover? Do they cover those 17 points?
So Cade McNamara,
He's on the bench.
he's hurt,
Okay.
and he might be out for the season. So that is the type of thing that makes me think Michigan might cover. I would stay away from this game too, because this is the first real test that Michigan's facing.
But I'm putting it on you to make a pick. I know
In
you would stay
reality,
away.
I would stay away, but for the sake of this,
17 points.
I'm gonna take Michigan to cover because there's been a lot of talk about how they haven't played anybody and et cetera, et cetera. I think they want to make a statement. I think they want to make a statement and retain their top 4, standing. That's super important.
Okay.
So I think Harbaugh rallies the troops, gets them organized and ready, and if Talia throws one pick, one turnover, if Michigan wins the turnover margin, I think it's a blowout for sure. Maryland has to be on all P's and Q's, and I think they have the quarterback to do it. I just don't think. I think 9 times out of 10, or at least 6 times out of 10, Michigan should get the job done and cover.
Okay. Well, JJ, our work is done here, but I do have one extra game for you.
Okay.
Penn State at home. They're a 26-point favorite against that team in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, CMU, Central Michigan. Does Penn State cover the 26 points?
Well, not only do they not cover, they don't win the game. The Chippewas pull the upset. Fire up Chips. Let's do it.
You heard it, America.
Let's go.
JJ has spoken. JJ, we out of here.
I'm ready.
All right.